Hi everybody, it's Kris Hicks, Head of Press and Communication at UKIP. I'm once again joined by Carl Benjamin. We're just talking about the stories of the day, Brexit related and otherwise. The next thing really on the agenda I think we should talk about is the potential for an actual postponement of Brexit itself. We all know that the political establishment are trying to do it in some way, shape or form. I'd like to start with certainly a story that was revealed by an ITV journalist earlier in the week, where he was attending a function, I believe it was at the Belgian embassy, which was also attended at by Mr. Ollie Robbins, the Prime Minister's chief Europe advisor. He then, it appears, followed Mr. Robbins to a hotel where he claims he was also staying, and he found Mr. Robbins in the hotel bar with 200 other individuals. And apparently Mr. Robbins was talking about the current strategy in Parliament, and that he's effectively confirmed that they are running down the clock on Parliament in order to then present an either-or of effectively, look, either support Mrs May's deal or it's a so-called no-deal Brexit. Now, obviously, he would do this knowing that the majority of MPs are Remainers, and the last thing they want is that. However, what he also appeared to admit in that is that that is actually a totally false. It's effectively a bluff. They do not actually want to threaten that. If it does come down to that, they will then be forced to attempt to extend Article 50. So it's been revealed effectively. It's all a bluff. It's all a strategy in there. Loose lips sink ships, as they used to say. Well, what do you think of that kind of revelation?
I wasn't previously aware of this before we started recording, so this is news to me. But I think that the Conservatives are in no position to be bluffing anything at the moment. They don't exactly seem to have nerves of steel, and what happens if someone calls it? I don't think they've got the. I think this is desperate. This is just desperate because, like we were talking about earlier, the political capital just isn't there for them to be able to take the reins and do anything. So now they're reduced to these kind of, I guess you could say underhanded tactics to try and get something that has been roundly rejected by both the political class and the public through as if. I can only assume it's because the EU is intransigent on their position. They seem to be desperately uninclined to negotiate, as if Britain isn't worthy of being negotiated with. And you can see the fault lines are appearing in the European Union now, where you've got the German, I don't know what the German equivalent of the Chancellor of the Exchequer is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was saying, well, this is going to severely impact us. This is going to, and Ireland particularly as well. So the EU basically is going to be forced into some sort of negotiations and compromises. Because I just don't think they're in a strong enough position to be able to take the punches that Britain can probably take. But yeah, as to the likelihood of all of this, you're going to know much.
Yeah, well, I've been batting on the idea that another European Parliament election is probably 70% likely, and I've been doing this. I've been of this view for quite a long time, actually, probably over a year. Not that we in UKIP or myself we have some kind of magic ball that we can predict all of these things, but the way I've been kind of modelling these potentials is based on the idea that fundamentally this government doesn't want to leave the EU. That Mrs May's strategy, if you want to call it that, her plan is effectively to kind of keep our kind of toe in the door, and then we can kind of easily be brought back in at some point or another. What is happening at this point is that there clearly isn't any kind of parliamentary majority. Mrs May's deal, look, it's dead in the water. She's talking about making amendments, going back to the EU, but as you said, the EU has been consistent on this time and again. We're not interested in another negotiation. Now, that could be, again, another negotiation strategy. But I think
it undoubtedly is, but it was unbelievably frustrating, especially given the abject nature of Theresa May's deal. I looked at it and considered it a capitulation. This is the sort of thing that, this is the sort of thing that happens after a major war has just been lost, and we haven't even fought yet. So it's rather frustrating. Sorry to interrupt, but it was just one of those things that people outside of Britain, in particular, should be aware that Donald Trump would have done a much better job of negotiating a deal and proposing a deal, and he, in fact, actually did sort of diss Theresa May in that way, didn't he? He said that he wouldn't do it this way.
Well, what a situation it is when it seems like the president of a foreign country seems to be actually fighting for Britain's interests more than the Prime Minister herself.
Absolutely, and this happened with Tony Abbott, the ex-PM of Australia. He's very much described himself as an Anglophile, and he was like, look, there are so many unilateral actions you can take that you don't have to ask the EU for permission for, and they will solve many of the problems that you're coming into. Like the Irish backstop thing. There was an article in The Sun the other day, I don't know how trustworthy this was, but effectively they believe that the European Union is going to demand that Ireland put up a hard border with Northern Ireland. There's no way Britain's going to do that. There is no political capital to be gained, and there is nothing but loss for someone in government to say, right, we're going to start putting up checkpoints along the Irish border. We would never happen. So they would have to make that happen themselves. Or, and as this is what Tony Abbott was saying, it's like, so that's a win for Britain, no matter how that plays out. You know, that's good for us. And then you've got the question of citizenship of European nationals. Just give them British citizenship if they want to stay in the UK. That's a unilateral action we can take, and it's a win for us. Then it's like, now you're one of us, and you know we're negotiating.
And make it reciprocal as well. British people.
The implication would be, come on, Europe, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave 1 million British citizens on the continent out in the cold? Is this the responsible pro-human rights organisation that you claim to be, or is this a cynical power strategy that you're using against a former partner that you see as now a threat?
Absolutely, but the problem we face, of course, is that we have a government currently that's not interested in fighting for British interests.
No.
It hasn't been
No.
from day one. No. And you know, as I've said, if you go into any kind of future modelling and take that assumption that the government just doesn't want to leave, it's not interested in fighting for British interests, that's what you end up with. So, you know, the government, according to Robbins, would go and look for an extension. They would go to the EU, every single EU nation would have to agree to that. So if one vetoes, then an extension is off the table.
Yeah.
What I fear is that if one actually then does veto, Theresa May could come back and say, well, look, I can't allow a no-deal Brexit, I can't get an extension, well, we're just going to have to cancel Article 50, aren't we, and try and find some other solution.
I dread to think of what the consequences of that would be.
Well, the first consequence certainly would be a European election.
Well, yeah, but I mean publicly, like there are going to be a lot of angry people out there.
Oh, absolutely, very angry people.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll be one of them.
And same with myself, and same with all UKIPers and everyone who voted Leave. There's 17.4 million people. I mean, right now, we look at this kind of stuff very closely. We're kind of tuned into politics. But to be honest, if you ask the average person in the street about Brexit right now, most people really assume Brexit's happening, or it happened.
It's being dealt with in a responsible manner, presumably.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, we don't really know how people will react once it comes out. You know, headline news, Brexit cancelled, Brexit delayed indefinitely. So that will be very interesting. And of course, we have potential for European Parliament elections, which are currently set to run on May the 24th, if indeed we don't leave. And of course, there's been a lot of developments on that front, hasn't there? I mean, we've seen the foundation of a new party, haven't we?
Yes. So talking about Nigel Farage's Brexit Party, I suppose I'd better make it clear that I'm a fan of Nigel Farage and what he's achieved, you know, but I think that he was a powerful force within UKIP when he was in it, and he was one of the major driving forces that made Brexit even happen. And I think that in a large part he can consider it his life's work, and successfully so, you know. So the formation of a Brexit party, I mean, I'm a member of UKIP, obviously, but for me, it's not necessarily about party loyalty, it's about loyalty to the ideas, you know, the sovereignty of the country. That's what I'm concerned about. And so Godspeed for, you know, hopefully he can leech all of the Brexiteer Tories out of the Tory party, maybe start the slow collapse of that party or something like that, and gain some traction with pro-British interests rather than pro-European interests in Parliament. But honestly, I'm not that optimistic about it. I mean, I think that it's very much a Westminster thing. I think it's again, like a London, and when I say Westminster, I mean the sort of like the political bubble around this sort of area. And I think that I don't think it's been very well conceived. Like, the very name is a bad name. You know, like the Brexit Party. I mean, Brexit is a buzzword that was presumably coined by someone in the media somewhere. And the buzzword itself has connotations. And I think at this point, a lot of people are genuinely getting sick of talking and just hearing about the word Brexit. So just call your party the Brexit Party. if public opinion is just, I mean, they're not against the idea of leaving the EU, they're just sick of hearing the word Brexit, then, I mean, you've kind of made an optical mistake there to start with. But what UKIP learned very quickly after the referendum was that if you're a single issue party and your issue is successful, or at least on paper, then public support withers because they're like, well, you've done your job. And so this has got no future beyond the Conservatives either failing to deliver Brexit or, you know, giving us a halfway house that still fails to deliver Brexit, obviously. And so I think it's, I mean, at best it's probably going to be a flash in the pan, but I mean, and this is one of the things that I was so impressed with UKIP about. When we joined UKIP, I mean, the YouTubers, obviously we all supported Brexit, but we were also interested very much so in other social problems and other political issues that are happening that are genuinely important, I think, and something that has very clearly been well meshed with UKIP's sort of core values. You know, the things, you know, free speech, sort of like secularization, and that's an important factor when we talk about the Islamic communities in the north. You know, that is an important subject that has to be talked about, but it's very difficult to talk about it. I mean, as we saw at the conference in Bolton the other day, we had, it was a free conference, so anyone could come in. I think it was 3 Britain First or BNP guys came in, and they ended up rage quitting the conference in anger because Gerard had said, well, of course a Muslim could join UKIP. You know, I mean, there are Muslims in UKIP, but no, neo-Nazis can't join UKIP, and they were very furious about that. They considered it some sort of ethnic betrayal or something. But yeah, but the point is, UKIP's a surprisingly centrist party and doesn't act in the way that the press would portray them. And I'm kind of meandering now, aren't I?
I can pick it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I wrote a piece. I wrote a piece about this in Political Light last week. Kind of the idea of a Brexit party and the idea of UKIP, and it really comes to ask the question: well, what is Brexit, so to speak? You know, is Brexit just an event? Does it just happen and that's all done? And I would say that no, it's actually a process. There were many reasons why 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU. It wasn't just fundamentally about just leaving the EU. There are many issues related to that, whether it's, you know, concern about mass immigration, whether it's concerns about us not being able to pass our own laws, for a multitude of reasons, whether that's in terms of policing crime in this country, whether it's the cover-up of various crimes in this country that has been discussed before, and also really the death of industry in certain areas of this country, which people of course blame EU membership on, and they're quite rightly to do that. So my view is, if we do actually achieve Brexit, God willing, on March the 29th, or in any time period coming up very soon, Brexit Day is not the end of Brexit. No. Brexit Day is the beginning.
And that really good setup there, because what you're saying about all of these issues, on the surface level, the issue is about what they, you know, the self-contained issue, but fundamentally underneath it, the question is of control. You know, who has control over the way the country is being run? And at the moment, it's people outside of the country. And it's affecting, in a negative way, people inside the country who are finding themselves with little other way to try and recenter the decision-making power and the sort of the way that the focus of the political class is moving back onto themselves rather than onto some foreign issue that, you know, it is either unrelated or openly antagonistic to what their interests are. And yeah, so the sort of restructuring of control. So another thing that middle class Remainers like to do is say, well, I mean, what you're complaining about Islamic immigration? Well, that doesn't come from within the EU. No, it doesn't. But that's not the only kind of immigration that comes into the country, and all of it is the quantity that's the problem at the moment. But again, it's about. I mean, it is genuinely like a message to the political class saying, this is coming back here. You know, you've got to recenter yourself in this country and for us, because we are the tax-paying voters, and we will make ourselves heard.
Well, my view is kind of, well, what's the point of Brexit if you don't have a domestic government who's willing to implement the kind of policies which alleviate the issues which led to 17.4 million people voting for Brexit in the first place? And that's my kind of core criticism of the idea of a Brexit party, which doesn't stand on, you know, a full plank of principles. You know, the Brexit Party, as we see it, is a vehicle for getting elected to the European Union. There are no other policies. And in my article, I also talk about
are they not going to be running for Parliament?
They have come out and they've said that currently we have no plans to run in general elections.
Oh, I assumed it was a general election party.
No. They're talking about this for the European elections.
Oh,
They've
okay.
also said that they have no intention of running in the local council elections on May the 3rd. So, this is... People have to ask themselves, if they are given the question on a future European Parliament election, do you want to vote for a party that has a full plank, full ideas, and a broad range of things, or do you want to actually just, vote for an electoral vehicle? And my thoughts on this is going back to the idea of Brexit being a process and not an event. Yeah. We have to look at the idea of domesticating Brexit. We have to look at developing those policies and answering those policies. And, I look around at the establishment parties. You're not seeing that from the Tories. No. They're not willing to engage against political correctness or stand up for freedom of speech and many other issues that, in many cases they used to stand up for. I mean, Labour are hopeless on that front for the most part. I mean, they've given up on the traditional working class.
In many ways, they're the problem, frankly.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they've totally engaged themselves now with identity politics, with kind of social justice, warrior-ish issues. They've gone away from the bread and butter of real class politics to that. And then the Liberal Democrats, well, they're very wishy-washy on many things, and including freedom of speech. So
who talks about the Liberal Democrats?
Well, and that as well. But I mean, they oppose things like Article 13, but at the same time, they also engage with...
They support the European Union in principle. So if the European Union says, well, we're appealing to Europe as the entity, the ideal, what's the Liberal Democrat argument? I mean, it's the same question that I have for, honestly, like, when you see ladies in full niqabs and men in thobes with massive beards wandering around. I mean, that's how ISIS would like them to live. What's their moral objection to ISIS? If ISIS are just going to impose the regime, are they suddenly going to fall back on British liberal principles, saying, well, I mean, people should be free to choose themselves? Call me cynical, but I don't think these people are going to make that kind of objection, because I don't think that's their fundamental belief structure. But you know what I find really interesting about the Brexit Party, actually? I don't see it as a threat. That's like because I mean, I've had a lot of people saying, well, you're a member of UKIP. Nigel Farage is a popular Brexiteer. Are you not worried that this is going to impact UKIP in some way? And honestly, no, not really. It just seems to be an attack on the Tory party, if anything else. And I mean, I don't see it as being an electoral threat now. I didn't see it before, but now I certainly don't. And I don't think that UKIP has anything to fear from this at all.
No, absolutely not. I think the main disappointment, though, is it does have the potential of splitting some kind of vote at a European Parliament election. It was very interesting. A Tory Remainer last night said, basically there are supposed rumours there are about 15 Tory MPs are looking to defect to the Brexit Party. And he said, well, why don't they do it, go over there? But as I said, there's no intention of them running at general elections. And, Tory leavers, while they believe in leaving, they're still going to stay in their safe seats and pay heed to the Conservative Party. And again, that's the problem that we have, is the reality of party politics, whether it's the Conservatives or Labour or anyone else.
And it's just up to the public. These seats are only safe for as long as you guys want them to be safe.